So from the last broadcast, we envisaged wide volatility the coming in the week trading week that just passed, and we talked about the fact that DXY was getting weaker, and a weaker DXY would mean strength relief for the rest of the market, and that has been very well established. The last this the Friday close was a confirmation as to the establishment of a weak DXY. We've established that DXY is currently weak within the past couple of weeks. But does that mean a trend reversal for the rest of the market yet? We'll find out in today's broadcast. It's Pedro. It's your boy Pedro again, and welcome to Crypto Reality. Yeah. So I'm just gonna be giving you what just gonna be giving you a quick rundown as to what's our last broadcast, what how the market has reacted to our last analysis. We talked about um, expectation of a wide volatility the coming week. We just finished on Friday, and the cryptos are set to close today. And we talked about a weak DXY, and we talked about this bounce that we're currently seeing from the DXY, and as a result of this trend line, the bottom of this trend line, we saw a bounce, and we expected this bounce to move up a little bit, at least to this point, before the next major resistance, and that has been the case. We talked about the fact that markets are gradually gaining strength. You can see with the likes of Euro USD. So here in today's broadcast, I'm going to be telling you what I expect the market to do, how markets are supposed to react as to relative to the behavior of the DXY. So the DXY is weak. There is no doubt about that. That has been established. But what needs to happen? A weak DXY could just be a retracement, a mere retracement for the market, mere retracement for the DXY, and a relief for the rest of the market. But for the market to see massive reliefs or massive or possible trend reversals, you need to see more weakness from the DXY. So here's what I think is going to be the likely scenario from the market. Here's a trend line that has been very well established. If you switch over to the weekly time frame, this is the DXY. Weekly time frame for the DXY, we have this trend line that has been established since March. I hope this is clear enough, and we've been trading within this trend line since March, and we've been respecting the bottom of this trend line very well. We've been bouncing off the bottom of this trend line after a major retracement from the weekly time frames, and also from the daily time frames as well. So we're currently bouncing off the bottom of this trend line, but from the daily time frame perspective, you can clearly see that just as we discussed and we established in the last broadcast, that we're currently formed a new lower high and a lower low. We're forming a lower low for the very first time since the establishment of this trend line, forming a lower low. This is a major lower low for the market, but despite forming a lower low, the trend line is still very well intact, hence the bounce from this point to the upside. So the first point of weakness is this lower high followed by this lower low, and then you can see the bounce. We envisaged a bounce. As the last broadcast, we saw a bounce from this point, and we're around this very point as at the last broadcast. We're about here, so we're envisaging that this relief should continue to the upside, and you can see that we found our next major resistance at this horizontal level. Markets on reaching these points reacted massively. This is a massive bearish engulfing candle. So this is to buttress our point that DXY is getting weaker and weaker. Well, this is going to be another lower high. So if this is to continue, if this trend, this mini up down trend is to continue from the daily time frame perspective, then we should close below this lower low, and that would mean it close below this trend line bottom, and that would be that would be a continuation of that would be a continuation of this mini downtrend that has just commenced on the daily time frame. So this being the case on the DXY, if this trend line still remains intact, if this trend line still holds as supports, that means at least a daily close above this trend line, it means the DXY even if seemingly the DXY is seemingly in a downtrend, in a weak state, would only be in a sideways trend, you know, to only sets the DXY in a sideways state rather than a downtrend, and that would mean that market would basically just the rest of the market would basically just be in a sideways, more like a ranging state than major reliefs or major or a trend reversal. So this trend line needs to be compromised on at least a daily time frame perspective, because the compromise of this daily time of this trend line would also be a confluence of a new lower low formation and further weakness for the DXY on a daily time frame perspective, and that would result to strength for the rest of the market. Here's why this time frame needs to be compromised. Looking at it from a weekly time frame perspective, this is why this is very important. If you look at this trend from a weekly time frame perspective, this is only but a major retracement for this current impulse move from the DXY. So it means that this whole move that seems like a lower low and a lower high formation from the daily time frame perspective is only but one single this is one single retracement move from the DXY on the weekly time frame perspective, and this is very well respecting the trend line that has always been intact ever since the establishment of this trend channel, this uptrend channel, since March. So if this seems to be the case, and you can see that the market is very well respecting and bouncing off the bottom of this trend line from a weekly time frame perspective. So if this continues to be the case, so long as this continues to hold, not just on the daily time frame perspective, just like I showed you, if this continues to hold us on the weekly time frame perspective, then it means that the market and the DXY is still not weak. It's not, the trend for the DXY is still not reversed yet, until we start seeing further weaknesses, which would come, which would happen via a close on a daily and weekly time frame perspective below this trend line. It's the bottom of this trend line. Then before we can start having that conversation of a very weak and possible trend reversal for the DXY, and that would mean strength for the rest of the market. So this trend line is very crucial as to how the rest of the market will behave. If the market still keeps closing above this trend line on daily and weekly time frame perspective, then the DXY will still be in an uptrend and will just be stuck in a sideways market. If it does not go up, if it does not form a new higher high, if it keeps closing above but still above the trend line, but still unable to form a new higher high, the market will still not yet, the trend of the DXY will still not yet be reversed, and that would mean that the rest of the markets, like the cryptos and the stocks, the forex market, will still just be in a sideways market, sideways state, rather than major reliefs and possible trend reversal from the market. So I hope that makes sense. You can see this is how the market has reacted. The Euro USD, as usual, it's a mirror version of what happens on DXY. The massive sell-off on Friday has been the response from the Euro USD has been in like manner. You can see that the mini trend uptrend line is also very much respected as a result. We are seeing a bounce, an inch perfect bounce off the bottom of this trend line, which we introduced to you in the last broadcast. And looking at the Bitcoin chart, the Bitcoin is also respecting this current weakness from the DXY, and you can clearly see that the market, like I said before, is the bears are currently weak and exhausted as things stand, and the market is still very much in a sideways state. Our safe box is still very much intact. That is dependent on how the DXY behaves. The DXY needs to start closing below that trend line we discussed earlier for the market to start taking out the likes of this range top, and most importantly the top of this consolidation over 4 months, getting to 5-month consolidation, which came in August at around 25,200. So the market needs to start for the market to do that. The DXY you need to start seeing the DXY close below this trend line on daily and also weekly time frame perspectives. So currently the market is set to close above the 21 MA on a weekly time frame perspective for the first time. The 21 MA has been a very critical MA in the indicator in the market. On the weekly time frame perspective, it has played a vital role as to the trend direction of the market in time past, and so far so good. It is still the case as things stand. So we are currently set to close above it for the very first time this year. We had what seemed to be like a close, but not a completely. We basically just closed on it back in March, and you can see that that turned out to be a false break, and you can see that continued the downtrend for the market. We're currently seeing for the first time since basically this year, we are set to close above that for the first time. this year, and that has been the battle. That is currently the battle for the market right now. The market is set to close above it. Closing above it is not an issue. The market needs to show that it is seriously closing above it, not the type of close we had in March. We have to see a convincing close. That means a serious big momentum close followed by serious volume. The volume is definitely working in favor of the market as things stand. We have an increase in volume, an increased volume as relative to the last week's close. But what is the market currently doing with the volume is what has been the struggle for the markets over the past months. So the market needs to show more seriousness. It needs to be a convincing close, or we need to see if the market is set to close above it, and this doesn't seem like a convincing close. So that means that in the coming week's close is going to be pivotal. We need to see something convincing. If we don't see that from this current week's close, the next week's close should convince us that the market is ready to go up and start taking this very highs, like the one here, this range top, as well as that of August. So basically that is from me today. The summary of today's broadcast is basically the fact that I need you to understand that yes, the DXY is weak, just like we have established from last week's broadcast. But does that mean a trend reversal for the market? No. I've tried to. The summary of today's broadcast is just to give you a clue as to what you need to start seeing happen on the DXY chart for the rest of the market to reverse, and I've been able to establish that from both daily and weekly time frame perspective. This trend line followed by this level is very critical. This trend line is critical. It's a very critical. The market needs to start closing below this trend line for the market to start seeing major reliefs and possible chances of a turnaround of a trend reversal, because that would mean a new lower low from at least a daily time frame perspective, and a compromise of this downtrend, this uptrend channel, which would show weakness from also a weekly time frame perspective, because the market needs to start doing that to form lower lows. From a close below this would give market a chance to form lower lows from a weekly time frame perspective as well. The market keeps staying above this trend line from on daily and weekly time frame perspective, then the rest of the markets, the DXY stays above this trend line on weekly and daily time frame perspective, then the rest of the market would not stand a good chance of reversing the trend. So I guess you got value from this side. If you did, please let me know in the comment section, and always feel free to share and like and subscribe. And always remember that this is for educational purpose and not to be treated as financial advice. Financial trading is a risky affair. Always endeavor to carry out your own research before entering any trade. So do have a lovely week ahead. Bye bye.